There are concerns that Parliament may once again be falling short of fulfilling its oversight role, this time in relation to the findings of the state capture report. The ANC Caucus in Parliament is being accused of using its majority to block attempts to deal with the recommendations of the inquiry's findings. The fifth and final installment of the report is expected sometime next month, but questions have been raised around whether Parliament should act sooner. For more on this now, let's bring in Siviwe Gwarube, who's the Deputy Chief Whip for the DA in Parliament. Siviwe joins us via our telephone line this morning. And it's lovely to have you on the program as always, Siviwe. Thanks so much indeed for making time. We're speaking to you, full disclosure, ahead of an opinion piece that she actually wrote, I saw it published on News 24, where part of what you say is that Parliament as an institution is stifling efforts to deal with the findings of the Zondo report. What do you mean by that?
Good morning, Ayanda, and good morning to your viewers. Look, I mean, we are quite concerned, in fact, that Parliament, at least under the leadership of the Speaker, Newzroom Afrika, is stifling efforts for us to get started on the report. The Speaker has argued that, in fact, Parliament should wait until the President tables the report in Parliament before we can start acting on its findings. And our view is quite simple. It's that, firstly, the President is going to be tabling the report with his own implementation plan as far as it pertains to the work of the executive. The work of Parliament cannot wait for the President, nor should it wait for the executive. And so what we need to start doing is we need to start acting on the findings of the Zondo report, also simply because there are members of Parliament, there are members of the executive, and there are some presiding officers who have been implicated in this report.
How much work can Parliament really do, Siviwe, in a context where still there is one party that has a hold of the majority of members in Parliament itself, and that has a bearing on the outcome of the work that Parliament is trying to do?
No, it does, and I mean, and this is now the problem, Ayanda, with the political party that does abuse its majority, as we have the ANC. But what is really, for me, the most really hair-raising thing is that the former Speaker of the National Assembly, Thandi Modise, during the State Capture Commission proceedings, essentially apologized to the nation and said that it was clear that Parliament had neglected its oversight role and part of the reason why State Capture was able to thrive. Now, we've got these findings, and Parliament can get started. Firstly, set up a parliamentary inquiry that will have real and utter consequences for the people who sit in the benches of Parliament, for the people who are members of the executive, that Parliament should be holding accountable. So there is work that can be started already, which is not being done. And our view is that this is not simply a coincidence in any kind. The ANC is stalling unpacking the findings of this report because, of course, a lot of the ANC members in themselves are the ones that are implicated in the report. And also, it's not lost on some of us that, in fact, if we are to accept the Speaker's argument in this, is that the last installment of the report is likely to land in the middle of June. The President was given 4 months after the last installment to table his report in Parliament. So we're looking at October, November, Ayanda, when Parliament will start waking up to the fact that it, as a national legislature, has an obligation to do its work separate from the executive. The President, whatever he will be tabling, will be his implementation plan in terms of holding the executive to account as the head of government. We have our own responsibility. And it's not lost on us that it very well may be that there's a stalling is because of the elective Congress or conference that's happening at the end of the year.
Sure. What do you say, Siviwe, to people who believe that it's much more circumspect? In fact, it's better, no matter how you view it, to have a holistic picture of what the State Capture report has found before initiating things like the parliamentary inquiry that you're suggesting? Because ultimately, I imagine it's what is contained in the recommendations of this report that will inform things like the term of reference for this inquiry.
Absolutely, and our argument is not that we should start suspending presiding officers, for instance, who have been fingered in this report or whatever the case may be. Our argument is this: we need to start setting up the systems. We need to know. Parliament has never dealt with a report of this kind before, and so there really is no template. Why can we not start setting up the system so that when the last installment of the report lands in June, Parliament starts its own process? We're not simply saying that, the Speaker's argument is that wait for the President. And this is the problem with also a presiding officer and a Speaker, Ayanda, that is executive-minded. Because there's absolutely nothing we need to wait for the President for. The President is going to tell us what he's doing in his cabinet. We're an entire separate arm of the state, and we should be doing our work, setting up systems. By the time that next month comes and the last installment of the report comes, Parliament is not only then waking up to this fact. The public is watching and wondering what it is that public representatives that they've elected to office are going to do to, in fact, hold those people accountable, the people who stole and looted state funds. It seems to me that we're doing the same mistakes that we said happened under state capture by not acting or at least starting to do the work now and simply, giving deference to the executive when, in fact, the executive should be held accountable by us.
Speaking about past mistakes, you've been an MP for, I think it's about 2-3 years. You'll correct me on that. And, of course, Parliament has a track record. Given how this current Parliament handled, for instance, the Zweli Mkhize case, the Ethics Committee, how they handled that matter, how confident are you that it is this Parliament that will enable us to see any kind of justice around whatever's contained in the Zondo report?
Look, it's incredibly disheartening. I mean, to have seen the track record of Parliament, it's also disheartening, Ayanda. If you are somebody who's looked at Parliament and past Parliaments before, how it has been systemically hollowed out over the years. People who were fair, people who understood the gravity of the work that they were there to do, have since left or, are simply just quiet and bench warmers. And so, of course, I have my reservations about the ability, particularly under the current Speaker. I have my reservations about whether or not we'll be able to do this in this Parliament. But you know what? We cannot simply let it go. There were people who are alleged to have looted and stolen public money. And so we're going to push hard to make sure that Parliament does not simply become a spectator where it should be leading the process of holding people accountable. So the rules are there, the Constitution is there, the criminal, the other institutions such as the Hawks and the SIU have already started their work, setting up their systems. There's absolutely no reason why Parliament cannot get started on its work and make sure that we don't repeat those mistakes again. Sure.
Siviwe, if I can also speak to you in your capacity as the spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance on a separate issue. So much has been said about John Steenhuisen's visit to Ukraine last month, and that's because it happened to coincide, ironically, with the mass shooting that we saw in Khayelitsha. The suggestion here being there are more pressing issues that the DA perhaps and its leader should be focusing on here at home than in Eastern Europe. What's your response to that?
Look, firstly, I think let's deal with the Khayelitsha matter, Ayanda. The Western Cape government and the I personally seen the MEC was there right at the beginning of this crisis because, of course, safety in the Western Cape has always been an issue. And that's why I think the DA has been very vocal about saying that we need to capacitate the SAP to be able to fight the kind of crimes that we're seeing in the areas in the Western Cape. And so I think that there has been sufficient response from the Western Cape government and the city of Cape Town that has descended on that in that area. And I think it's unfair to make the argument that multiple things can't be true at the same time. Yes, we've got pressing issues, we've got crippling hunger, we've got rising inflation prices in South Africa, the standard of living for people. We've got all of these things that are happening, but we also have a global crisis. We also have a country that has been under siege, and so such as the Ukraine, and we've been very vocal about supporting to say that we are calling for the end of Russian occupation in the Ukraine. So I think it's unfair to simply say, simply because there are crises at home, you simply cannot go to another place to go and see for yourself what the issue is. Because we've always said that whatever happens in the Ukraine and whatever's happening in the Ukraine-Russia war, the reality is that it will have local implications, whether it is the rising the cost of living and the like. And so I think it was important for the DA leader to go and see for himself. It does not necessarily mean that he cares less about the issues that are happening back home. And in fact, he is back home and was in KZN just the other day to go and see where the parliament has begun its work with the rebuilding there.
Got you. Very quickly, do you reckon that visit was worth it?
Sorry?
Do you reckon the visit was worth it?
I think absolutely.
Right.
I think very few leaders in the world have actually gone to see for themselves the true devastation that the war has caused.
Siviwe Gwarube, thanks so much indeed for speaking to us. Siviwe is not only the spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance, but also happens to be the Deputy Chief Whip for the DA in Parliament. Once again, Siviwe, appreciate your time.